So yeah, I suppose just to begin with, thank you again for all of your time in this for the October version of the Housing Hive. As I say, today is going to be all around data-driven trust. So in terms of the agenda, we'll run through some quick intros shortly, just myself and to Prodo and a couple of my colleagues as well. I'll provide a quick brief background on the topic, and then we'll hand over to Arturo, Dell, followed by Cresser from Notting Hill Genesis to talk through their sort of insights on this particular topic, coming at slightly different sort of angles and lenses as well, which may be really beneficial for us. But yeah, just to begin with, hello, good morning. My name's Jacob. I'm head of sales here at Prodo, but I get involved in consultancy delivery here at Prodo as well. So worked with lots of Prodo sort of key accounts in the housing sector over the last 5 years or so. And yeah, a big part of my role is sort of understanding sector challenges and sort of exploring those and putting forward potential solutions. Data is obviously a big part of that, certainly when we're talking about digital transformation and maximizing the possible benefits around digital solutions as well. A couple of Prodo colleagues on the call with me today as well. I've got Olivia and Claire. Do you want to say a quick hello?
Yeah, shall I go first? My name's Liv. I'm an account director here at Prodo, working with lots of clients across the sector. Really looking forward to today's session. If you have any questions as we go through, please feel free to pop them in the chat and we can pick them up at the end. I'll also be putting in some helpful links as we go along, so keep an eye out on the chat pane as well. Claire?
Do we have Claire with us? Maybe not. Maybe she's not managed to join this morning, but no worries. Maybe she's on her way in, but we'll make a start. So yeah, we'll introduce Adam and Arturo shortly, but I suppose just to begin with some background. Obviously the purpose of today, data-driven trust. Trust is a big element of what we're sort of hearing about in the sector across the board at the moment. And it's very much what we're driving towards as a partner agency across the sector as well, looking to create that transparent service delivery with residents to sort of build that trust between provider and customer. Digitizing the experience for those people who are willing and able to do so to sort of deliver that transparency. And in turn, the sort of ultimate goal is obviously transforming customer experience, but also unlocking that capacity internally with that sort of digital engagement to spend with those people who maybe are digitally excluded or have more complex needs, or however that might look. I guess to digitally enable people, providing them the platform to self-serve certain aspects of their tenancy, unlocking the internal people in terms of customer support to spend with those people who can't essentially. But the potential for this and the success which could be achieved as part of digital transformation in terms of that freed up capacity and transform customer experience is really sort of centered around data really. Without that sort of piece of the puzzle, the possible benefits and successes attached to it is going to be definitely sort of limited. And obviously data in the space is an ever-evolving picture. The challenges around it are people are moving in and out of homes all of the time. Their personal information is being changed and updated in personal scenarios. Housing stock is acquired and sort of expired. IT systems are changed, and we're all sort of focusing, aren't we, on this drive towards digital transformation for customer experience and hearing customer voice. But there's obviously lots of things which go into this. So yeah, we are joined today, as you will have seen from the registration form and some of our communications around this, by Arturo, Dell and Cresser, who are going to bring, as I say, very sort of different lenses to this, both having spent time outside of the space, both having spent considerable time within the housing sector as well. So really looking forward to the guys giving us their insights on this. But I think to begin with, we're going to hand over to Arturo to talk about his experience as a sort of well-known digital leader in the sector and consultant across many different clients in the sector. So Arturo, I wonder if I could hand over to you to introduce yourself and cover your aspects to this, if that's okay.
Excellent. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Can you confirm if the screen is coming through?
That's looking great. Yeah.
Excellent. So morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this kind of data conversation we'll have. As Jacob was saying, this is data is such an important topic and such an essential component of digital transformation and transformation in general. So my challenge was to kind of do a brief introduction and kind of, you know, set some themes and some topics that then Adam will go into much more depth in his presentation. So just as a bit of introduction, I'm Arturo Dell. I run my own consultancy called Knowledge Industries. I work extensively in housing, but also in other sectors. And my experience of working with organizations of all sizes in housing has given me like some perspective, and I've picked up some trends that I wanted to share with you, and hopefully they prove interesting, and perhaps you recognize some of these things in your organization. So I'll go very quickly through these 4 trends, and then hopefully they prompt some questions at the end. So let's go. So I wanted to start with, let me see if that, perfect. So the first one that I wanted to talk about is cloud computing. So cloud computing is one of those things that we've been talking about in the sector for probably the last 5 to 8 years, but it's really begun to take shape and start moving very fast over the last 3 years. And organizations are really moving accelerated to the cloud. And this starts opening a lot of different opportunities. And what it's really interesting is that from a data perspective, the opportunities in the cloud revolve around more capability to store information, the ability to really use some very powerful services that exist in cloud providers. But it also has some challenges, like, for example, the skill transition. You will have in your organizations people who have worked for years using, your SQL Server in-house type of systems, and then moving that skill set to the cloud brings in some real challenges. For example, one of the challenges that you experience is that you're asking your data analysts to work as developers, work in a very different way, which not always works well, and that sometimes has some real challenges. And the other thing about cloud computing is that it's such a fast-paced environment, and things are changing so quickly that it's really hard to be able to keep track. So I'll give you an example. Lots of organizations were just getting their head around Synapse in Microsoft, the kind of the online data warehouse. And before they knew it, it's changed to Fabric, and everything is different, and all the kind of the pricing models and the way you operate is different. So that ability to stay on top and be able to really provide some kind of guidance around a very quickly evolving landscape is really tricky. So this is the first trend that's taking shape in the sector, and particularly having an impact on data teams. Then the second one, I think, is pretty evident, and it's what we would call like the environmental perspective, where the sector is being pushed quite strongly by the regulator and by different governance structures to really start demonstrating in many different areas their customer commitment, health and safety, but also there are some other trends. For example, there's a lot of expectations on the sector to start proving their sustainability commitments, to start evidencing some of the ESG transitions. So there is this real importance on regulation. And what does that mean for data? Well, it means that the importance of data quality, the importance of having a strong database for providing insights and for making decisions just becomes more important. And whereas before, this has always been a preoccupation of the sector to have good data, now you have to have good data, and you have to prove that you have good data. You have to demonstrate it. So it's just getting that emphasis that has always existed, but perhaps it's a real opportunity to take this environmental pressure and just drive it in the direction of improvement for the organizations. Then the third one is self-service. And self-service is interesting because a lot of the audience here are familiar with self-service in terms of customers accessing services online through portals. And that's a trend that has been going on for a long time. But actually, self-service in data is slightly different. It's this idea that you move from saying, oh, I need a report, I'll call the data team and they'll produce me a new report, to saying, well, actually, I know what I need, I have the data, I have some skills, I'm just going to go and get my data and I'm going to start doing the analysis myself. And this is incredibly important and very transformative because, as Adam will probably highlight in his presentation, the demand for data and demand for analytics is very difficult to meet. It's a constantly growing need, and the ability to allow your users to kind of to self-service and be able to produce their own analytics is incredibly important. Now, the flip side of that is that, if people are doing their own analytics with data that is of poor quality, then that will only cause more chaos and get further and further from that goal of being evidence-based with quality data and responsive to regulation. So this trend, very important, and those of you who are involved in data teams, the transition of the data team from being an enabler for analytics in the business to being the people who just churn reports out is a very complex cultural transition. So yeah, another really interesting trend. And then finally, and of course, you know, we wouldn't have a data presentation without talking about AI and data science. This is just taking over in terms of interest. I think you all know that this is talked about in all different conversations. Probably lots of your exec teams will go to briefings where incredible things are happening with AI and data science, and I think that's completely true. But the question here goes around, how do you apply it? There will be a race to be the first, but actually, what is the benefit of this technology? How do you embed it? How do you mature some of your skills and evolve them from what they're doing today to be able to benefit from this technology? And there might be some areas in housing where actually some of these technologies just don't provide necessarily a benefit. And this kind of maturity and knowledge to be able to assess which is which is what is needed in the sector now. I think there's some very exciting developments, but there's a lot of hype as well, and a lot of pressure on people to jump on something that is not yet proven. Just to give you an example, if you are thinking of doing a lot of work with generative AI, the type of ChatGPT algorithms that produce content, well, you have to think about how much time you're going to spend checking that content. And if the time spent checking the content doesn't really add any value over doing it yourself, then those are the kind of questions that you have to ask yourself. But there's some other really powerful scenarios where it adds up and really powerfully. And of course, the ethics question is essential. We've probably gone from a phase of GDPR kind of awareness and understanding the importance of protecting the data. Now this is taking it to a new dimension, and we'll have to learn and probably relearn a lot of those principles in order to understand the ethics of this space. So those were my four trends that I wanted to highlight. I hope that resonates with you, and I'll stop sharing and pass over to Adam.
Just a quick one on that final point, Arturo, if that's all right.
Yeah,
so
of course.
From an AI perspective, obviously, it's, as you say, it's a very popular and sort of trendy topic at the moment. Everyone's talking about it and sort of looking to maximize it as much as possible. I think from our perspective, where we've explored it is the making use of that to sort of help with inquiry, triaging, or reports of repairs, and sort of using an AI model to make that more efficient with the use of image recognition and voice recognition and things. From a data point of view, feeding that into asset management databases, etc. But I wonder, from your experience in your position, if you can think of any specific examples of where AI has been utilized quite well in the housing sector, maybe for another purpose or something similar.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm looking at Adam here to see if he's going to include some of the good examples that have happened in. I know in Notting Hill Genesis there's some real kind of future thinking around AI and data science. So I think the main answer there is that there are some spaces where, you know, AI techniques and machine learning and data science have a really strong space in housing, and they've had for a while. You know, risk verification, prioritizing, you know, rent collection and things like that is a very mature space. I think what's interesting now is to start saying, where are the new spaces where this technology can have an impact? And that might be around the productivity of staff, or be able to help those staff that are dealing with the customer to be able to provide a better service, aided by some form of technology that makes their job easier. So I think that's a space that everyone is looking at. Of course, it'll remain to be able to say, can we predict maintenance? Can we get there before things fail? And that will continue. But I think the new wave now with generative AI is really focused on these kind of productivity improvements, and where really in the organization they have the biggest impact. So that's what I'd say. But I think perhaps Adam will have a couple of examples in his presentation around really good approaches to it.
Excellent, sounds good. No, really appreciate that, Arturo. It's really interesting covering those key themes as well. So thank you for that. I do have another few questions for you, but I'll hold off on those until the end in case other people want to ask you questions as well. But yeah, Adam, I wonder if you would, we'll hand over to you now to introduce yourself and talk through your insights, if that's okay.
Thanks for the handover, Jacob. So yeah, good to see everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to spend some time with you this morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Adam Cresser. I'm the Director of Data Analytics and Digital here at NHGs. And my role really is about trying to help NHG to become more customer centric. And so I business change and service improvement through those kind of data and digital initiatives. In terms of like my day-to-day responsibilities, I oversee the software architecture, the analytics, and the data governance team. And as Arturo alluded to, my aim is to try and build on his introductory session, talking about those kind of sector trends, and to share some of my experience on how that's probably playing out for us as a housing organisation, and specifically highlight the importance of data in achieving, your strategic aims and our strategic aims. So I want to talk to you about the strategy, what we're trying to achieve, which should be interesting, but I guess my feeling is sometimes that's a road well trodden in terms of most theory around what makes a good data strategy, what's going to help you, is fairly common now, I think. But the interesting aspect for me that I wanted to share with you was around the execution and some of the lessons that we've learned along the way. So that's the format for my talk. I've got about 20-25 minutes to fill, and I'm going to introduce you and share with you what we've been trying to do, why, and I'll probably drop down into 3 or 4 specific examples and try and pick those apart about how we went about it, what I probably learned on the journey, as opposed to a kind of play-by-play of everything we've done, because we won't have time. But and hopefully in doing that, it will help you on your way too. I wanted to start with a bit about me and why I'm talking about this. So I'm not a technologist by background. I think my journey is fairly unconventional in this space. I've worked in housing for about 17 years. Started as a housing officer in a local authority. So I've spent my time understanding the operation. I've worked in various senior leadership roles in operations, service improvement, and compliance. And the reason I say it's unconventional, because going into it as I'm not a technologist, one of the things that I think I've been able to do is layer on that past experience and harness it to see problems and opportunities through the lens of delivering value and what it means for colleagues and for customers. NHG is a member of the G15. We're a large London-based landlord. We've got about 67,000 plus homes. We were born in the 60s, but we're a digitally transformed organisation, so we've migrated to the cloud and so on. And we embarked on the creation of our own customer solution about 4 years ago, and we've got about 70% of our customers registered for that, and about 1 in 4 transactions happening online. And I can talk more to people offline about that if anyone's interested in understanding more. But the reason for me introducing that is, like many in the sector, it didn't help us to address some of the key challenges that many of us are facing. So, customer satisfaction being sticky, transactional feedback being higher, but perception, normally indicator of trust, being lower. We could also see that this digital change has surfaced new challenges, this kind of hidden industry around making systems work and making sure that processes work, that was falling on staff, and worse still, where we weren't, that might have impacted on poorer or lesser journeys for our customers. And I guess the fundamental thing is that trust is built on competence. It's built on doing the things you say you do. So if your digital experiences are poor, then that's going to undermine your ability to do that. The other dimension, as Arturo started to allude to, is if you're going to take opportunities around personalisation or generative AI, you need to be in a space where you've got good data that's feeding those solutions. So the big message up front for me is around making sure that housing providers, that we've got a plan to do so and that you're investing in it. So and Notting Hill Genesis, so our corporate strategy is really positioned us around responding to some of those things, so around the quality of services and homes, and data and technology is one of the enabling themes that forms a key part of that kind of corporate strategy. I'm not going to go through those customer outcomes that are on the right hand side, but the interesting thing for me is they're all linked to data in some way, or have got a value chain linked to data in some way, whether that's service charges being presented to the customer that are correct, because the apportionments are right, and so on. And my job has really been about figuring out how we can use data to meet the needs of residents and those aims. The other good thing, or reason why I wanted to share this, is because as an organisation, it recognises the importance of data in turning the organisation into that customer-centric one. And that kind of seat at the top table is something that we've worked really hard to create. So the fact that it's in the strategy for me is an indication of the maturity of the organisation and the work we've done. So it's a good sign of progress of what we've got today. The underpinning that's got us to there, I guess, would be around our strategy. So this is the kind of what did we set out to do, and this is our strategy on a page. And it's all focused about building business capability and getting more value from the data that we have, recognizing that the more we can do to be understanding what will happen or predicting what will happen, and then using that to drive service, is what's going to enable us to make more impact on outcomes for our customers. And so that we're really clear with the intent of the space that we want to get to in terms of this. And the way we've done that is identify, well, what are the clear strategies, what are the clear things that we need to do as an organization. And so the first of those is really around consolidation of our data. So we have the data that we need to meet our aims, that it's accessible and it's usable. And the thing about that is it's being really intentional in the way that we do that. So the way we create our technology estate, how we grow that pool of data, has to be linked to the purpose of what we're trying to achieve as an organization. And I definitely feel that where I've have oversight now of both data and the digital technology, that's given me real value to be able to influence that. It means you can identify, when systems are coming up for renewal, that you're able to take opportunities to get to a point where all of your systems are accessible, your data in those systems is accessible, and you don't end up with multiple records. And for me, I would argue the biggest asset that you create is the data that's in those solutions anyway. So making sure you think about it up front. It's not just a technology conversation. That's a big maturity lesson for us in terms of making sure they're more aligned, and it's upfront that we thought about it. The second strand of that is about building trust in the data we need to run NHG and meet our aims. And that's, for me, recognizing that we're not digital natives. We're an organization that's over 60 years old. There's a hell of a lot of data to govern. We're in a complex and heavily regulated sector, and we've got the backdrop of this kind of like finite resource that you're always operating on. And so we've chosen to really focus on the things that are going to unlock value, or the things that are going to help us to meet our strategic aims. The third strand of that is about developing the skills across NHG to improve outcomes. And maybe in hindsight, I would phrase this differently now around capabilities, but it's the same principle. The idea being that you need to create structures that manage the data, that make it more usable, and I mean that in the broadest sense, not just for systems, but that it's usable later down the line when you get it out of the system, and you need to do that front, and recognizing that to do so, it needs to change the way that data is being thought about in terms of the way we work. And I mean by that, it's not about creating a load of new data roles, but it's about making sure that in the organizations, we're creating roles that if you're a housing officer or you're a manager, that when you're coaching people, you're using data and so on. So it's more about aligning it as part of just the way we work, as opposed to these specific data initiatives. Likewise, it's about ensuring those folks that in our teams that are responsible for surfacing that data, as Arturo kind of alluded to, you've got the skills and capabilities to meet what needs you've got now, but also what's coming as well. And the final section of that is around ensuring that you've got good products that offer real value. So unlocking business value that make a real impact. And it's in that final mile that things can go wrong, I think. So if it's in the wrong format, if it's in a rubbish format, then people won't use it, and you'll not make the impact that you want to. So that is, for us, is about making sure we use the tools and technologies available to make sure people adopt it and they're using it as well. So that's like a helicopter view of what is a really deep and detailed piece of work. But the thing I probably take for granted the more I talk about this is that's the staple that's kind of held us and kept us honest as we go through challenging times, or as we get things that come in from the environment. It always gives us something to fall back to say, well, where are we trying to get to? And the other thing is that beneath this, there's a layer of projects that sit to meet those particular aims, and I'll talk about that in a bit more in a second, and jump down into a detail of a couple of the items. But before I did that, one of the things I wanted to kind of tease out was what I think is what differentiates the approach. And that's about that, you know, that this is very much business strategy. So my view is that pools are much more effective. So where you're getting people to work, where they're coming towards you of their own volition, where people want to do something because they can see that it's got a positive impact on, you know, the outcome they're trying to achieve, then you've got a better chance of success, as opposed to, you know, doing something that's a top down because you have to, which, you know, in my experience tends to create a short-term pressure and a short-term outcome, but it's whether it really sticks. So that kind of concept of pulls rather than pushes is really important. In terms of the execution, for us, it's always been that it's not some superficial theoretical link. So, you know, we've got a good understanding of the business, what pressures they're under, what they want to achieve. We've created a deep understanding of the culture of the organization. And within each of those strands that I showed you are kind of key milestones or deliverables that all in one way or another look to unlock business value, you know, look to meet a need that our colleagues in the business have got, that they're dealing with the customer. And an example of that would be, you know, technically we've got about 600, we had about 600 reports in Tableau. They're all pretty poorly built, you know, built over a number of years. Our data platform is in Azure. So from a technology strategy, it would steer us to say, all right, well, we need to migrate those 600 reports into that new technology stack. But, you know, if you're trying to explain that to an operations colleague that, as they were, which is going through an ops transformation, trying to improve customer satisfaction, trying to initiate a performance reset, how do you make sure that that doesn't become a technology project as opposed to like something that's going to add real business value? And so the way we did that was to say, well, okay, well, rather than, you know, do a mass migration, we focused on, well, what are the things you need to succeed in that next period? And it was around creating some consolidated scorecards. So rather than maybe using 20 dashboards, they just use 1 or 2. That allows managers that are going into new roles to thrive. And the benefit of that is the you know, your colleagues see that as a, well, actually you're supporting me, you're helping me with my aims, as opposed to you get your technological outcome. You get that anyway, I think, but it's just accepting that sometimes it's not it's a slower road, but actually it's a more impactful road in terms of aligning to that business element. The other thing I've always been really conscious of in the strategy delivery has been the environment, and Arturo alluded to this earlier as well, is, and I found that you can have the best plan, but at the wrong time. So I've already referenced the regulatory and operating environment, but also the economic one, right? So if you're in the focus of cost pressure, as we are now, you know, very much feels like the basics are kind of back in style, and they're the things that people are looking for, you know, and your ability to justify your cost, right? And it has to be standing to scrutiny. And so the best people, I think, to advocate that are the people you're delivering for. And if they can see there's value, that's the conversation to have, as opposed to kind of that cost focused one. I've also found that those successes, so if you can deliver value, if you can show to people that you're helping them, that gives you space to operate and progress as well. And so I think you need that to be able to kind of get your agenda moved on. And that example I used earlier is a good one of that. And if you can do that, you end up with the right message, the right time, but you also need to be the right person. So the thing I've found transferring into this area is that actually relationships are still the thing that get things done. So, you know, I've worked really hard, and I think that would be a good place to kind of focus some energy, because you have to leverage those networks. The downside of my background, for example, was coming into this, I had to demonstrate I was a safe pair of hands on the technical front. But the flip side is everyone knows you, they know your brand, you're able to then leverage that. And they, you know, the perception of, is Adam trying to push something that's just a pure technical pursuit here, or has he done some of the thinking around, you know, what this means for my operation or how it's going to help me? And so you can align yourself as kind of somebody that's supporting. And you need that if you're going to get people to either part with their money or support your initiative, right, in the politics of organizations. So focus on the relationships has always been really key in terms of turning this into an operational success. And on that point as well, the relationships that you build across key power structures across your organization, so identifying where the most influential voices are, and being intentional about how you create consensus and allies. You know, I spent a lot of time at the start of the kind of strategy development engaging with key colleagues, and what I found was that became multipliers in terms of the value that they were adding. So, you know, they were the ones that were going out and talking publicly about the work we were doing, or they were the ones that were advocating in those kind of key meetings as opposed to me. So spending time in that space is really beneficial if you're trying to get your data sorted. So if I drop down into one of the areas and start to give you a bit of a feel for some of the specifics of what we've done. So focusing on the kind of idea of building trusted data, and our work in data condition has really been about us, has been a really good start. Really gave us a kickstart in our program about how we can demonstrate credibility. So it was one of the first areas we tackled, but it was also one of the topics which is on people's mind in terms of, as Arturo said, talked about, in terms of what's going on in this space. There's a lot of focus and a lot of prescription around this area, and that was one of the areas I wanted to start with, in the sense that, you know, there's the knowledge information management papers, the sector risk profile, a lot of focus on needing to prove this, and we definitely have to prove and demonstrate compliance. And, you know, from my background in that space, I understand it better than most. But my challenge to us as a sector really is about culturally, you know, by doing that, you frame this as a defensive activity, as opposed to an offensive one. And by that, I mean, actually, it's about building business capability, right? So, and enabling us to meet our aims. If we focus on that rather than an activity that's prescribed to us, which I think is probably the minimum, that will stand us in better stead. And the reason I say that is because the idea about personalization, the idea about generative AI, and the opportunities that can unlock, if you can identify the business capability you want, that's what you can focus and build yourself towards. And in our work, we've got to a place where we've got over 12 or so data assets now, and I've listed some of the examples on the slide here. And the good thing for me is we've improved the condition of all of those items. But more so, my experience prior to coming into this space was that there's a surge and then it stops off. The important thing for me is we've maintained steady progress in each of those kind of data items. We're up to kind of 90% now, or over 90% in key areas like component data, sales, customer data. And the reason we've been able to do that is because we focus, I think, on building business capability. So by that, I mean, it's really focused on what the business need, what problems they're trying to solve. I've done other talks on detail on data governance. I'm not going to drill into the mechanisms here, but this is about us honing in on a business problem, following that problem that the data is causing, helping the people that are using it to baseline the condition of it for the purposes of what they were trying to do, and then enabling them to manage and drive that improvement themselves through kind of greater visibility, through new tools, things that they're able to see quite easily. And the beauty of that work for us is it's really experiential. So the people that are responsible for the business problem are also the people that get to know their data better. And that's allowed us to scale as well. So, you know, we have a small team that works with them. We don't have to kind of stay and handhold after the event. They're kind of quite self-sufficient. And so the frame, what I mean there, better, our assets data work, for example, wasn't an abstract pursuit of data quality or better data information. It was around improving our plan program so that it had a better impact on customers. It was about enabling us to proactively plan our program rather than relying on referrals. And there's subtle differences that I think change people's behaviors. When doing this, what I've found is it's something I think about a lot of the program as well, is the importance of pragmatism. So if you take our data example in housing, you know, we've got 60 years worth of data. How would you go about sorting that when you're in the backdrop of those kind of finite resources? And the obvious answer is really just got to do it piece by piece. And so our agenda has always been driven by individual projects, individual initiatives that are all leading towards the kind of the end goal of what we want to. But we've worked with a real intent to do this on a project basis, so we deliver consistent value quite frequently. The environment has been a backdrop again in terms of most of what I've spoken about, and the reason I pull it out is because what Arturo was probably alluding to at the start was really about some of these crises that occur, and for us, I guess, in this space, that's what, and you'll see with by nature of the compliance nature of some of those governed data assets, is we've really honed on that and used that as a kind of an opportunity to say, well, okay, this is the reason why you need to do it, and there's crises everywhere that you can kind of pick on. The other thing for me is that sometimes as kind of leaders in this space, you have to initiate the opportunity as well. So by creating the same urgency, and so the example I use here is about our sales data. And so one of the things we were working with colleagues on was, all right, we could see that, you know, the collapse in terms of the sales market in London competitive edge is really important now. So it's a more competitive environment. You need to reduce your marketing costs. And so their aspiration was around being able to segment customers and predict which were most likely to buy our homes. And what we were able to highlight was, right, the reason that you couldn't do that was because of the condition of your data, the quality of data. And through the work we've done with them over the last year, we've gotten to a point where they've got kind of over 90% confidence in their ability to use that data for the desired purpose of segmenting their customers and being able to predict which one it is. So it wasn't there. We shone a light on it, and we're able to surface it as an issue to address. And the final element of the work on data condition really is that I think you've got to make the most out of the hand you've got. And again, Arturo started to talk about this in terms of the skills changes that are happening in the sector and how you keep pace with it. And my view on this is you're always dealing with the imperfect, so you have to maximize what you've got to be able to succeed. Our job is to build capability to meet our aims, but it's never as simple as, I want to do this, I get some people in, and then they're tomorrow. One of our biggest challenges around the data condition work was, okay, so when you identify what you want to do and there's merit to it, you've then got to figure out how you do it. We were really clear technically we didn't want to get hooked on a vendor. So, my strategy was around focusing on building capability to do this work in-house, so that we could have in control of it, so that we could grow that skill base, and then we could accelerate as we needed to. And we were really deliberate. So we took some of our own people, we took the two most technical analysts that we had in our BI space, and we pivoted them to be part of this kind of startup. And that really supercharged our program, right? In the sense that we had good technical skills, that SQL skills and so on, but they also had a deep understanding of the organization and a connection with the work already. We weren't bringing somebody in from the outside to kind of do that. And it really just accelerated our journey. So little lessons that we've learned along the way. And if I look at another couple of final examples, so this is about how you build skills and capability in the organization. And Arturo, keep in mind, talks about the kind of shift towards self-serve analytics. If I frame where we started, we had a mixed operating model. We've now got a franchise model, which is in place and pretty much up and running and being used well. We've got inconsistent skills. We had inconsistent skills and competencies across the organization in those franchises, but now we've got much more consistency. We've got clear defined roles and skills pathways for those people in those franchises. We had aspirations about what we wanted to do in terms of the advanced analytics and generative AI that was alluded to earlier, but we didn't necessarily have the capability to meet it in the sense of the platform, the skills, the business people to ask the right questions. But we've now got to a place where we're able to do most of and all of those items. We've governed our own data, we've got an understanding of the condition, we've got the ability to do these kind of more advanced analytics items that we want to. And so there's a couple of examples I wanted to drill down into that maybe will help illustrate how we've done that. The first of them is our community of experts. Our analytics community of experts is like a key link in our franchise model. So we've got about 40 odd data folks that are across the organization that are in some way touching data. Some of them, a smaller number of them are actual analysts that sit within finance or HR or, different areas. But a lot of them are kind of, your ad hoc kind of data users. But it's existing resource. And the question for me was, all right, I've got to get to an endpoint where we're improving standards, we're improving consistency. But for me, the trade-off was, if you had that direct under your control, you've got to make sure you understand the business operation really well. You've got to manage it. And there's also all the politics about grabbing resource to a central function. And we've tried to avoid that. And we focused on creating this community. And that stuck true to the idea that, pulls are better than pushes, that we create an environment which is engaging, where those people in that community see the benefit. And over the 18 months we've been doing it, that's become a really strong community, really well attended. And it's really started to have some really good tangible outcomes. It's become a progression pathway for people. So we've been able to drive up the skills and standards within those franchises. But it's also a really good example for us of silent disruption. So we can use those structures to then drive our agenda, create standards. We can start to talk to people about competency areas like UX, raise the statistical skills, knowledge within the organization, and data science skills, and expose them to new learning. And we had a good example quite recently where we had one of the members that came and showcased some of their work. And this work was they had applied some of their kind of Python R learning and started to predict what was going to happen in rent arrears cases. The beauty of that work for me was it was this kind of organic experience that was happening outside of our remit of control in the centre. You know, the idea that you've got people able to get on, they had a sandbox environment, and they're not part of some central project that was being spun up. They were in the kind of the managers' meetings and able to start to add some value. And so really good example of that kind of self-serve analytics franchise model in practice. And the second one was around our growth in advanced analytics and so and generative AI capability, because like many of you and like was alluded to at the start, it's the kind of vogue thing. And my CIO, so I'm really lucky, Rajiv, is a really big technologist in terms of vision and what he would like us to do. And that's great because on LinkedIn, he'll spend time at the weekend playing around with these items and sharing videos and showcasing. And that's really good for me because it gives me confidence that, you know, there's space to innovate, there's space to drive for change. Conversely, the other side of that is it raises expectations across the organization and more generally. And remember, the backdrop of this is those limitations on capability, you know, the basics being back in fashion, the focus on cost. So, you know, the challenge for us was how do you start to even get into that space? And we've got to a space where we're actually able to, we've got this fledgling capability in the teams, but also we've got better capability in our central functions to start to do that. And the things I wanted to share with you about that journey was really, we found, well, actually the opportunity to lean into innovation, show your entrepreneurial spirit was really important. And so the way we did that, and you may have saw it on the first strategy item, was we were really clear about these kind of 3 pilots that we were going to run. And to many ways, they were kind of contained punts that we were taking, but they were items where we said, well, okay, we're willing to fail as long as they're small, they're contained, we fail fast and we get good learning from them. You know, they were always going to be, to a degree, throwaway. And in doing that, we worked with good partners that helped us to understand. So, you know, there'll be people on the way that you can learn from and that will help you. But the big thing for me I took from it was this is not a linear journey that goes from A to B to C. You know, you have to be willing to make decisions that are sometimes not going to work out. And my experience with those pilots was probably illustrative of that. You know, I needed to be able to build this capability to scale, but we had to try different things. So the first pilot we didn't work out. And you saw my story on sales earlier, so that was one of our pilots that we created, but it gave us some learning in terms of our data quality and that the right data you need to do this work. We also tried to outsource, but actually that didn't give us the learning we needed in terms of, well, what skills do you need to run and maintain these things to create it? Are they the right questions you need to be answering to use AI or generative AI to answer? And then we tried another partnership, and that helped us because practically it allowed us to kind of create a really good generative AI use case example. And the picture you can see here is Lucas, who was one of our graduates or fellows that we took as part of the program, and they used generative AI to try and join some of our historical data sets together. One of the problems we had as a housing provider was aged, you know, different. We had really good structured data for the last 5 years, but, you know, prior to that, we've got customers that have been in our home 17, 20 years, and how do we make sure we bring all that data together? And the ability to start to see, well, actually, were there multiple repairs? Was the damp and mold, you know, these things, and it could do this. So when you went out on an annual visit, you weren't taking half an hour or an hour to look at the information. You could be drilled down and identify, well, I needed to look at a certain time in that customer's history quite quickly. So there was practical outcomes there, but what it did was it allowed us to, one is have good use cases to sell in the organization, the art of the possible, but it also gave us some good learning in terms of, all right, so out of that, we said, we'll hire that person, we'll take them for 6 months. We didn't have an established post, and that's turned into a couple of permanent positions. It gave us really good understanding of the environments we need, the sandbox tools you need to be able to do this work. You know, some of the bureaucracy we'd have to take out the way to enable them to succeed going forward. But also it exposed those people in the analytics community of experts to new thinking that stimulated them as well. And so in terms of that kind of journey, I didn't set out to say, oh, this is how I'm going to do it. It almost happened just by, you know, one opened up another door and another door, and that's something you have to accept, I guess, but it's a degree of uncertainty. So hopefully that's useful in terms of giving you a couple of practical kind of examples of how we've done the work. The key takeaways for me really on this were, investment in your data up front is really important. It will keep you safe, but it will also allow you to thrive if you kind of lean into it in that mindset. The importance of being business aligned and engaging their language and trading their currency, value and impact. You also have to demonstrate pragmatism. We're all dead in the end. There's a reality that you need to achieve something in the short term. If you don't, you won't get the space to meet your aims or what you want to do. The environment is a constant pressure, but you're either a victim of it or responding to it and using it to kind of chart the next direction. And that would be something I'd encourage people to do. And also, like I said, take this approach of an offensive mindset and focus on what business capability you're trying to build, and lean into that entrepreneurial spirit. So I'm conscious there's a lot there, and I'm happy to open it up and ask any questions. And I'll stop sharing now, Jacob.
Sure.
Thank you.
Excellent. That was great, Adam. Really appreciate that. Thanks for bringing it all out together for us and talking through those insights. It was really beneficial to hear those specific examples. To be fair, certainly from somebody yourself at an organisation such as NHG. Lots of what you were saying was really consistent with lots of things we hear across the space in terms of where lots of the HAs are trying to get to with that sort of core data accessible in the singular tool. Working in a way which is very sort of project led and delivering value quite frequently in a way which sort of brings people on board in terms of buy-in from sort of exec downwards, general sort of buy-in across the board really. And obviously it's sort of driven you to a place which obviously you've been a big part of, the output being really well adopted self-service platform, lots and lots of trust in the data that you have, that sales data being 90% sort of confident was a great point. And that's another thing we should talk a lot about in terms of implementations of CRMs and things. But I wondered if from a project development perspective, in terms of working through that strategy, certain things that you've had to sort of obviously overcome along the way. It sounds like it's gone really well, and certain things you've probably had to overcome during that and sort of pivot potentially in terms of delivering that value. But is there anything in particular? I've just spotted a question come through, I think quite similar actually, in terms of biggest hurdles for you along the journey that you wouldn't mind elaborating on.
Yeah, sure. So if I take them both. So Jacob, this is the glossy version for the group, right? The reality is there's lots of scars that also sit beneath the development of that strategy. One of the things that we as a team have gone through is bringing all of the parts, so the digital technology, the data function, the data governance. They, when we started, weren't all under one umbrella. So bringing those together has really helped me accelerate that journey. And the other thing is why I started with that kind of section around focusing around some of probably the softer skills that I think you need in order to implement that strategy, is because you can have the best theoretical piece of work that's going to get you to where you need to be. If you don't have the support of those in the organization to deliver it, but the chances are you're not going to be able to do it. But also, as Arturo said, the space changes so much. If you end up waiting for perfection, you'll kind of miss your opportunity. So for us, that's been a key part of the strategy. In terms of the hurdles in terms of fixing data quality, for a housing association just starting out, I think one is like there's a lot of priorities, right? So trying to layer on another priority into the mix is a challenge that you probably won't overcome. If you do, it will be a short-term prescription that will get some immediate reaction and then probably fall away. So my big kind of like thing at the start would be try and find the areas in your organization that are the kind of the sweet spots or the kind of vulnerabilities, the crises, the kind of things that you can use to hook people's attention and use those as a way of demonstrating why you need to do it. We were in a similar place. The reason we didn't intentionally go for a large big bang type program and try and govern everything was the reason I said, but also because trying to convince people that there's enough value in this in the first place is part of the challenge. So we started with our asset component data, and we just followed that through and showed them as an example. So we said, well, this is what you're currently, almost like as a quite contained piece of work. We said, well, this is what your current state is. This is the baseline. And we worked with them because we could see it was quite a topical thing in the organization. We were just committing to an increased amount of money over the next 8 years to kind of bring our properties up to standard, over 120 million. And so we knew it was topical in the organization. We tapped into that focus and said, well, this is what data quality is. It's not data quality. It's about, you know, improving your business value. So for any startup, I would say you've got to like show them the value, the impact you can have as an association starting out. And the second thing was about your capability, you know, so building people that kind of have, you know, knowledge, domain knowledge, have an understanding of housing, but also have technical skills would be another big thing that I would kind of advocate. Otherwise, you know, you get churning teams, but also if you outsource it, you're always beholden to partners or vendors to kind of show you the way. We really wanted to kind of have control of, once we'd done the asset work, we could then, like, we know these sweet spots in the organization and drill into them.
Great stuff.
I just wanted to amplify what Adam was saying for Ryan, just with one other thing, is that if you're starting on data quality, it's very likely that it'll be driven by the pressure of the environment. And a lot of organizations that I talk to are really driven to do something about their data because of regulatory pressure. So I think take the message from Adam in the sense that if you just do it because of the pressures, or you just do it to comply with some legislation, you will be, of course, that's necessary, but you will not be achieving the next level up, which is improving your data quality to deliver some value to the business. And I think if you keep those two things together at the start of your journey, it will be very helpful.
Yeah. It's one of those, isn't it, where it's almost at times, if you are solely driven by the compliance or regulatory perspective, it's almost too late in some ways to make that change by the time that sort of kind of thing comes into place. And we talk a lot about with our clients the importance of having that data quality in order to sort of address things like the TSMs in preparation for those, or consumer standards, or obviously the scenario of damp and mold, and sort of identifying where those are and being able to demonstrate that those have been addressed. Would you say that on that basis, probably a question for the both of you actually, with those environmental pressures sort of ever evolving, I think in the past when we talk about digital transformation and data, how that sort of data fits into it, we've always talked about there's usually an internal champion around this. It's usually about trying to show value to sort of gain that internal stakeholder buy-in. Would you say that's a bit of a changing and evolving picture based upon all of these different sort of compliance and regulatory drivers? Is it less about now that internal sort of stakeholder exec buy-in?
I'll go first, Adam, and then so I think you'll always need the internal buy-in, because as Adam was saying, it's about amplifying your message. It's very easy for a data program or a digital program to become a technology thing, or just one more project. And in order to understand that this is a culture change, you need that strong leadership. So yeah, I think there'll be more pressure from the board. There'll be more pressure from external stakeholders. The environment is there, but being able to use all those pieces and drive your program in the right way is really the challenge, I think, coming up now.
And I would say I'd agree, Arturo, but also it's the opportunity. So you can see in this situation, so there is now that jeopardy. There is that kind of how you harness that focus on those kind of more defensive aspects I talked about the regulation is your kind of call to arms across the organization. So I think it's an opportunity, Jacob, but also the opportunity around knowing, for example, in the environment, cost pressure is an issue. You know, a lot of the focus of digital transformation was around automation, but the whole idea that actually there's unique challenges that the sector are facing around, well, all right, how do you retain good housing staff? How do you make sure that, you know, housing officers, whoever coming into this space, you can use the kind of generative AI or new technologies that are emerging? It should be around kind of helping us to kind of get knowledge work better, you know, so actually the productivity, the how quickly you can get people up to productivity level, all these things that are untapped resources for housing associations as well. So for me, it's that pressure's always been there. It's just understanding what those kind of unique items in the environment are at the moment, and then harnessing them, using them as opportunities, using them as to leverage what you want to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. I liked how you positioned that sort of at the beginning as well, in terms of the purpose being around driving towards customer centricity as well, and the sort of driver behind all of this really is a goal of improving customer experience to some extent, one way or another, isn't it? Really, in terms of maximising the utilisation of that data and I think at times it is a case of housing associations having disparate systems with data here, there and everywhere, and sort of moving towards a place where it can be harnessed and it can be used for segmentation, as you rightly put it, for the example of sales inquiries or even personalised service delivery. So that's a really interesting one, and thank you for that. Any other final thoughts before we close? I know we're nearly at time at the minute, so I was just thinking about, I don't think we've had any more questions come through at all, have we, Liv? Unless there's anything from you and the clients you're working with at all?
No questions.
No? Okay.
No.
Great. Anything final from yourself, Arturo or Adam, before we close on for the day?
Go on, Arturo.
I'll go first. So I think it's data is one of those things that perhaps finding the connection between data and the digital transformation that a lot of people are going through is essential. It's kind of, it can be seen as like a byproduct of digital transformation, or like, you know, you do digital transformation, you end up with a lot of data. But if you're more intentional, you could actually shape some of the digital transformation through the data. So I think that's a new space which is very interesting and is coming up. So think about it that way. Think about bringing your data at the beginning and build your transformation around both, and in a way that will deliver most value.
I think I'd agree with that from kind of current clients and how we're approaching things when we're trying to get also business cases for digital transformation projects. Say we want a new website, well, actually it's important to gather the data before we move on to kind of the delivery of anything that we're doing. So 100% agree with that statement.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just for me, just reiterating really that it's this focus around, so the data and the digital technology elements are the technical aspects, right? But making sure that the language we're aligned in terms of, it's about building business capability, about the customer outcomes you're trying to achieve. You know, I think that's the thing that's going to connect people. You know, most people in the housing sector are coming in because they want to be a force for good or change or make a positive impact on people's lives, and it's just about demonstrating how you can do that. And the only other thing, Jacob, is if anybody wanted to connect with me offline, happy to do that going forward as well. But yeah, thank you for the time.
Excellent. No, very, very nicely put, and appreciate your time as well, guys, taking time to join us today and sort through your insights. It's really, really valuable, and certainly sounds extremely well aligned to sort of how we talk about digital and sort of data in the space ourselves as well. So I really appreciate it, and thank you for that. Hopefully we'll do it again at some point. But yeah, just a very quick sort of closing point on the next following session, which is going to be the final one of the year, final Housing Hive session of the year, which is going to be 30th of November, same time, Thursday, it's 11 a.m. But yeah, as I kind of touched upon at the start, the next one's going to be specifically focused on sort of empowering the digitally excluded and how digital transformation and digital and data sort of feeds into that. We often think about digital as quite a faceless sort of service delivery and only relevant for certain sort of customer segments, it is only relevant for certain customer segments, but the higher that adoption and engagement rate is sort of geared towards unlocking that capacity for digitally excluded and sort of maximizing those offline channels for those types of people as well, or those types of inquiries at the very least. So if that's something you'd like to hear more about, feel free to head over to the page and register for that one too. Hopefully we'll see you there. But yeah, just a final point from me. Just wanting to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. It's obviously a very popular topic at the moment, sort of maximizing data and how that can sort of feed into the success of digital projects and ultimately driving towards customer experience improvement. So yeah, once again, wanting to thank you for your time, Adam and Arturo. That was great. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you soon and on the next Housing Hive session. Thanks very much, guys.